Welcome to another OCD Recovery Instagram Live. It's going to be another short Instagram talking about physical symptoms. So that's a distressing position for many OCD and anxiety sufferers, because what they feel is that when they start experiencing physical symptoms, and if they're sort of presenting in sort of ways that are different to just feeling sort of the tension of anxiety, the heart beating fast, if they're other than that, what happens is people usually mistake them for other symptoms, and then they get caught in a cycle of trying to work them out, and being then that sort of makes health OCD often feel worse because you think this is a real thing, this is different, and so on. So what happens with these, if we look at some of the physical symptoms, I'm going to go through some of them, is when you've been anxious for a very long time. Obviously your nerves are all startled in the nervous system's going through the whole body, so you can just have random sensations in parts of the body that you wouldn't have put down and sort of to tally it up to OCD straight away. You would have experienced them, and it's very confusing. And I know this from my own journey. It was extremely confusing because what I found is that some of them were so random when I wasn't anxious at all, but obviously I'd been anxious for a long period of time, that it became so confusing. So, for example, if after I'd gone through periods where I was starting to get better and I wasn't feeling anxious so much, what then happened is I would have, say, for example, very bad neck pain, right? And I would sort of say, oh, that was just from the gym or whatever, but it wasn't. It was the muscles in the neck were latched on and tightened up because the anxiety was firing that up, even though at that point in time I wasn't triggered or felt latched in an anxiety loop. The nervous system was still firing up. So I used to get very bad neck pain that used to hurt a lot when I was working out in the gym, made it difficult to sleep. But I'll go through the body very quickly about some of the physical symptoms that people can experience and why they are usually often mistaken, and people go down all kinds of routes then trying to investigate them in great depth when they don't actually need that. They need leaving and just carrying on with life, but getting more comfortable with them and seeing them come up, rise and fall, the sort of peaks and troughs of the physical anxiety. So if we look at the body, and I'll start from the head, you can get really tight jaw pain. I used to get TMJ, which is a sort of very tight muscles in here, which used to give a sort of clonking sound in the jaw. And then when I used to eat, it used to feel like the jaw was coming out of place on each one, and biting used to feel like it was all off and not on center. So that used to happen. I used to get very bad hay fever, really bad symptoms of hay fever. I used to get a dry eye, very bad dry eyes from anxiety. I used to get very bad rosacea that used to come up from anxiety. All of these things from anxiety. I don't need to say that because going through it, but some of them were obviously genetically predispositioned anyway. So, and already had some skin conditions like eczema that were then exasperated by anxiety much further. So things like rosacea was made more prominent. Things like very pale skin that almost felt translucent. Because I could see all the veins very blue in my arms and so on, because the anxiety used to do that in relation to circulation. Then coming down, obviously very bad neck pain. Then I used to have, what other things did I have? I had very bad tightness of muscles in the stomach, which then went on to form then became the gastroesophageal reflux disease, which I obviously was predispositioned with that anyway, but then lots of very bad reflux, lots of really tight muscles in the stomach, lots of IBS, all of those things which felt like they were happening on their own. Then I used to have just constant sweating, constant hot and cold sensations, aching joints, elbows, hands, fingers, very bad aching joints. When I used to work out, I used to think, God, this is maybe I've got fibromyalgia, maybe I've got chronic fatigue, something like that. Other things that used to happen was, what other things did I have? I had, I'm trying to think on the top of my head, heart palpitations that felt like a machine gun going off. So really, really strong heart palpitations that at times they felt like these heart palpitations, they were felt so random. They felt like they were sort of coming and going, up and down, completely all over the place. So I was very concerned about this. I was thinking at the time, how am I getting all these just like completely distorted heart palpitations with all different sensations randomly? 1 minute fast, 1 minute slow, 1 minute light, 1 minute strong, and that was happening all the time. Then other things that I had, just walking down the street felt very difficult. Blurred vision as well, like I was looking through a kind of mist. I experienced that. Then I had lots of eczema-related problems, skin infections, various skin problems. Not feeling like I always needed to go to the bathroom, especially during the night, that would sort of come and go. 1 minute I'd feel I really need to go, next minute I feel I wouldn't, or waking up constantly in the night doing that, then all distorted sleep, feeling like I was in a light sleep and not a deep sleep, then sort of interrupted, waking up all again, sort of like that machine gun-like sensation in the heart, but this time in sleep. So like just completely random 20, 30 awakenings in the night, all sporadic. So there was that. And then with other physical symptoms that came along were, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head here, what kinds of things: balance, dizziness, nauseous, all coming randomly. So you could just be out for dinner, not anxious really at all, and then suddenly bang, nausea out of nowhere. So you were absolutely convinced you had a really serious physical problem at that point, because you were thinking, how did this occur? How did this happen? So that was that, especially with random pains appearing in the legs, arms, the back, just out of nowhere. I used to think, God, my body's really breaking down, or I've really got something more serious. So then I was constantly going to the doctors, MRI scans, checks, the doctors missed something, there's something else. And obviously with OCD sufferers, you can really convince a doctor very quickly of what's going wrong with you, and make him feel like there's a genuine concern. I mean, a lot of OCD sufferers come into me, I know all the Latin descriptions for certain medical conditions, and they come in and they explain it to me like they've definitely got the diagnosis, they're terminally ill and they're going to die next week, because they're so convinced, they're so locked up in that sensation. And so that becomes, they become just utterly convinced. You can speak to an OCD sufferer and you say, look, the odds are 0.0000001%, and they'll be like, no, 100% conviction, even if it's completely out of the ballpark and it's just nothing near them. And that's what will happen, because it does that, and it latches all in the nervous system, and it creates all those health symptoms very much latched on, very much like you think, oh, I'm never going to get out of this, or this symptom can't not be anxiety because it's too prominent, it's too strong, it's too tight, it's too, it couldn't create that. I wasn't even anxious, I was asleep when that happened. And that's what happens with nighttime panic attacks. People are like, well, I was in bed, I was asleep. For that to just happen randomly, there must be something seriously wrong with me. And that's where the great books for that, and why they're on the reading list, is the Claire Weekes Self-Help for Your Nerves and the Paul David At Last a Life book, because they go into great detail about that through their own individual struggles. Claire Weekes, 40 years before Paul David, and obviously she was an anxiety pioneer at the time through all her work in relation to that. And then Paul David's really repackaged version of his own journey, it runs along similar lines to Claire Weekes, that goes into great detail, leaving the anxious body, the anxious sensations to pass, not getting involved and trying to stir the muddy water, leaving it to settle. And that's key. I mean, the amount of people that are go into A&E with all kinds of things that are anxiety related is huge. Now, that is because they're so convincing. They are so utterly convincing in that moment. You just can't believe, how could I have a throbbing leg? Well, imagine also this. When you've been anxious for so long, you've been in fight or flight for years, chronically anxious, chronically fighting your body, chronically fighting in your mind, fighting yourself for years, day in, day out. All the time, non-stop. You're getting periods of some brief moments of rest, or longer periods, and then back into the fight and back into the engagement. And you wonder why you're anxious, and you wonder why you're having physical symptoms appear out of nowhere. That's the reason. And even if you've been calm for weeks, it doesn't matter. Even months, even years. Claire Weekes, she talked about how she would wake up and she would have anxiety out of nowhere in the middle of the night. I've had that happen years later, no chronic anxiety, no chronic guilt, suddenly wake up in the night sweating and think, what the hell, I wasn't worried about anything for years. And it does that because your nervous system, it has cues when you're in your dreams and you're thinking of saying maybe a little feared scenario, remembering from the past in the something in the subconscious when you're asleep, not that we need to delve into subconscious. And then you get the activated physical symptoms, bang, that come on in the night. And that's what can happen. So you've got to get used to riding it. I don't wake up in the night when that ever happens, which is rarely, and think, shit, I need to go and get an ambulance right now, because I'm very aware of the situation. Of course, I have to gather my perspective of it for if it was a real situation or so on. But in reality, I've learned to roll with these things because of experiencing day in, day out changing symptoms. I used to have different symptoms every day, every hour that used to go like that. It was like living in a roller coaster of physical adrenaline in this cortisol-like soup 24/7. So I know exactly where you are. And I wanted to come on here to talk about that because physical anxiety is such an important subject to cover. Often the mental is covered. For some people, more it's a physical experience. So that's why we wanted to get that highlighted today. Guys, I will see you on the next Instagram Live. Take it easy.